The United States pays more for drugs than any other country.
They're profiting from what is fundamentally a broken system.
That the United States pays the highest prices for prescription drugs anywhere in the world. I was just looking at some of the numbers this morning. We pay about 250% more than 32 comparison countries.
What if I told you that 3 companies control the arteries of America's medicine cabinet? Ironically, they don't invent drugs or own hospitals. In fact, you don't see their ads splashed all over social media. But then they exist. Behind the scenes, they are responsible for almost every prescription pill on pharmacy shelves in the US and in over 60 countries. Each of the big 3 has tens of millions of square feet of warehouse space, a dedicated delivery fleet, and computerized logistics covering areas of operation. They negotiate huge contracts with major pharmacy chains to secure exclusive supply arrangements. Together, these pharmaceutical giants control roughly 90% of prescription drug distribution in the US. In the 2023 and 2024 fiscal years, the big 3 generated approximately $800 to $850 billion in revenue. This gives you an insight into their level of market dominance. It explains why the US drug distribution market is called an oligopoly. This level of power is almost untouchable. Over the years, McKesson, Cencora, formerly AmerisourceBergen, and Cardinal Health have been praised for moving life-saving medicines across thousands of miles with precision. I'm talking cancer treatments, vaccines, and emergency drugs. When retailers need urgent supplies, these wholesalers deliver with the speed of light. However, authorities made a shocking discovery in the late 1990s and early 2000s. It was not just regular medicines motivating these companies. Something more sinister slipped through the supply chain. Opioids. We all know what they are. Opioids are prescribed painkillers. They attach the opioid receptors to the central nervous system and slow down pain signals between the brain and body. They come in powder, capsule, patch, and liquid forms. This drug gets highly addictive if not used properly. More importantly, they're profitable to manufacturers, wholesalers, and everybody in the supply chain. Now here's the thing. While this medicine serves a good cause, it can be abused. Government records show that the big 3 distributors shipped massive quantities of opioid pills into communities across America. Why? Stick around because you'll be amazed. While at it, there was signs of impending doom. Orders of these communities hit the roof, but these companies stayed quiet. They didn't mind that they may get into trouble for it. In one widely cited case from West Virginia, court records showed that Cencora supplied 775 suspicious orders from a single pharmacy in Cabell County for over 5 years, but reported only 16 to the DEA. Picture a pharmacy in a small town. Truck after truck delivered bottles of pills that were later unaccounted for. Imagine how many prescriptions this represents and how many lives are impacted. The Center for Disease Control estimates that opioids have been linked to more than 500,000 deaths in the U.S. in the last 15 years. This figure represents loved ones, communities that have been gradually wiped out, and the entirety of counties being reduced to shadows of their former selves. In some families, losses pile up year after year until no one is left. Parents have tried to find explanations for their children's deaths, but haven't seen a single explanation. The Cencora case in Cabell County is one of many instances of opioid abuse. What about the others? The story gets more complex from here. There's a pattern with opioid abuse and deaths that no one talks about. In Greenville, North Carolina, deaths occur among all white teenage boys. In one instance, 8 of them were good friends and attended the same school. They were a few years apart in age and had a strong bond. They spent nights at each other's homes and played football together. Years later, this group of friends died from complications of an overdose. Several other boys followed the same route. To outsiders, these were regular deaths, but to insiders, there was more to it. It was obvious that millions of pills were shipped over a short period to these towns. These figures were far more than the local population needed. During the peak of the pill mill era, distribution volumes surged dramatically in many cities. In all these cases, authorities alleged that the big 3 wholesalers supplied drugs in areas that did not have the population to support the amount supplied. In multiple lawsuits, state and local government held McKesson, Cencora, and Cardinal Health responsible for shipping opioids despite internal data systems flagging suspicious patterns. When word got out, these companies argued that they complied with federal law and fulfilled their role as distributors. They have since denied any wrongdoing and maintain that they operate within the legal framework. Rather than take the blame, they pass it on to doctors and pharmacists who write and dispense the drugs. This is little wonder physicians have been jailed for criminal opioid prescribing. It's hard to take the big three seriously, considering their position in the supply chain. These corporations are intermediaries. They deal with large volumes and oversee the movement. This is the crux of the matter. Were the big three just middlemen following the rules, or did they enable the system that went out of control? How did millions of pills enter a small town? Let's break it down. No doubt manufacturers share a chunk of the opioid distribution problem. However, the spotlight is on distributors. Why are some of these companies facing billions in lawsuits? It is simple. Responsibility. Pharmaceutical wholesalers are critical links in the healthcare supply chain. They buy prescription medicines from manufacturers and distribute them to pharmacies, hospitals, and clinics. The medicines cover both outpatient prescriptions and generic drugs. In recent times, these wholesalers have branched out to pharma services, specialty drug distribution, and other segments. Under the Controlled Substances Act, distributors must maintain systems to monitor opioid shipments, identify suspicious orders, and report these suspicions to their local DEA field office. Here's where it gets dicey. Suspicious orders are those that are large, frequent, and deviate from standard distribution patterns. Plaintiffs in opioid lawsuits argue that these companies deliberately failed to monitor systems, even when data showed alarming distribution trends. In some other instances, they followed regulatory requirements. But then this was not enough to keep the figures in check. The court ruling has now moved from legality to moral responsibility. Even when companies like Cencora follow the law to the letter, what happens when the result is catastrophic? It still comes back to them. Think of it this way. Distributors are like delivery drivers, but this time they are more sophisticated with advanced data analytics, compliance departments, and regulatory expertise. They know when a hospital needs 5,000 doses of a cancer drug. They know which rural pharmacy suddenly orders more opioid pills than it needs. Armed with this knowledge, they go ahead to supply because they make huge profits selling addictive substances. It's here that we draw the line between mere compliance and ethics. This is also what makes the West Virginia appeal decision more complex. While reviewing the $2.5 billion lawsuit brought by Cabell County and the city of Huntington, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit suggested that reckless overdistribution qualifies as a public nuisance. In other words, if it causes harm at a community level, it is a problem, and this changes everything. As tensions from different lawsuits mount across the country, states and local governments, including Native American tribes, have stood their ground, demanding compensation. In the last 2 decades, they've spent a fortune funding addiction treatment programs, emergency response funding, naloxone distribution, and rehabilitation services. In a massive coordinated legal trouble in 2022, the 3 largest distributors agreed to a nationwide settlement, totaling up to $19.5 billion over 18 years. The breakdown is simple. McKesson will pay $7.4 billion, Cencora $6.1 billion, and Cardinal Health $6 billion. The funds are designated to help people taking opioids get treatment, make it less likely for people to overdose, and finally, create an environment for people not to take them in the first place. For affected communities, settlement money isn't a fancy word. It determines whether there are beds available in detox centers, whether overdose reversal drugs are stocked, and whether counseling services exist. This favorable deal is thanks to a structured collaboration with government officials. Recall that in the 1990s, there was a $246 billion tobacco settlement. Unfortunately, the money was siphoned for projects unrelated to tobacco addiction. Hopefully, this doesn't happen again. In addition to this fee, the Big Three also agreed to fund a new monitoring system to prevent communities from being flooded with high-risk medications. With this new technology, alarms will go off, and a red flag will be issued if distributors exceed the town supply. This makes sense considering the damage already done. With over 500,000 people losing their lives to opioid overdose, it is safe to call this an epidemic. The opioid crisis did not start with distributors alone. Manufacturers aggressively marketed painkillers to maximize profit. Doctors overprescribed, and pharmacies dispensed randomly. But for the gatekeepers, their sins are unforgivable. They saw the bigger picture and they ignored it. They just wanted to ship, make a lot of money, and expand into more countries. Come to think of it, would the crisis have unfolded differently if distributors had stopped suspicious orders earlier? Well, there's no way to know this. If there's one thing we can agree on, it's that addiction thrives in availability. The story of the Big Three is about accountability, control, and taking the blame for your operations. These companies still operate today as the supply chain largely depends on them. Because they exist, this debate as to why they should be held responsible for this national tragedy continues.